There's a quiet truth beneath the surface of global prosperity, a truth we rarely acknowledge, yet feel everywhere. Look at any map of wealth distribution today. Glowing financial centers clustered in North America, Europe, and parts of Asia, while entire continents remain dim. Look at corporate ownership charts, layered webs of holding companies, trusts, and investment vehicles that eventually lead back to a handful of surnames. Look at political influence. Nations reshaped not by governments alone, but by families whose fortunes outlast empires. The paradox is simple and unsettling. Billions of people built the modern world, but a small number of families wrote the rules. How'd they do it? Where did their power come from? And how does it still shape the wealth of today? To understand, we must travel back to the beginning, to a world on the brink of transformation. 400 years ago, wealth looked nothing like it does now. Land was power. Kings controlled nations. Merchants traveled for months to move goods across oceans. But in the 1600s, something revolutionary happened. The birth of large-scale, family-controlled finance. Amsterdam, London, Paris, Genoa. These cities became the laboratories of capitalism. Merchants realized that wars, trade, and exploration all needed one thing: money, and lots of it. But kings often ran out of funds, and that vacuum needed to be filled. So influential banking families stepped in. They didn't inherit kingdoms, they financed them. The Medici in Florence, the Fuggers in Germany, the Oppenheimers in South Africa, the Baring family in Britain, the Rothschilds across Europe. They didn't simply lend money, they shaped political outcomes. When monarchs needed to build navies, expand colonies, or survive economic crises, they turned to these families. And every loan came with influence, conditions, advantages, and opportunities to build intergenerational power. Slowly, the balance of power shifted. Instead of kings owning the world, the people who financed the kings began to own it. As factories roared to life in the 1800s, a new generation of dynasties emerged. This time, not from old aristocracies, but from industries that reshaped civilization. Names like Rockefeller, Carnegie, Morgan, Ford, Vanderbilt. Oil, steel, railroads, automobiles, electricity. The foundations of modern life became concentrated in the hands of a few. These families didn't just dominate single industries. They built ecosystems around their wealth. They controlled banks, insurance companies, shipping fleets, media outlets, political lobbies, philanthropic foundations. And through intermarriage, investments, and alliances, their influence compounded. By 1900, roughly 40% of America's industrial wealth was controlled by less than 1% of households. But this wasn't just an American story. In Europe, families like Rothschild, Schroeder, Warburg, DuPont, Dassault, and Agnellis quietly financed wars, rebuilt nations, and shaped economic systems that would define the 20th century. They didn't just accumulate money. They engineered systems that protected and multiplied that money. World War I shattered the old world. World War II built a new one. But behind every reconstruction effort, there were families and financial houses ready to lend, invest, and rebuild. International institutions emerged. The IMF, the World Bank, the BGS, institutions that created the framework for modern global finance. Publicly, they were run by nations. Privately, they were influenced by the financial dynasties who already controlled the flow of capital. Meanwhile, corporations became global, and with them, family fortunes expanded across borders. The Ford Foundation, Rockefeller Foundation, Rothschild Group, Agnellis' Fiat Empire, the Toyota family in Japan. These families played key roles in rebuilding industry, guiding economic policy, and shaping globalization. The post-war boom didn't just create prosperity. It created stability for dynastic wealth. By the 1970s, the world had entered a new era. Money wasn't just inherited. It was engineered through trusts, through shell companies, through tax havens, through multinational corporate structures that could shift profits across continents. The tools of wealth had become more sophisticated, and families who understood these tools quietly expanded their influence. Today, most people assume wealth is dispersed. Millionaires everywhere, billionaires in every country. But look closer. Most global corporations trace significant ownership stakes back to a small cluster of asset management giants: BlackRock, Vanguard, State Street, Fidelity. And who owns these firms? Primarily long-standing family trusts, foundations, and institutional investors connected, directly or indirectly, to century-old financial dynasties. Meanwhile, in industry after industry, family-controlled empires dominate quietly. The Walton family, Walmart, controls more wealth than many countries' GDPs. The Mars family, Mars Incorporated, controls a global food empire. The Koch family influences U.S. politics on a scale rivaling major parties. The Al-Saud family sits atop the world's largest known oil reserves. The Quandt family shapes the European auto industry. In Asia, dynastic influence is even more pronounced. The Li family, Samsung; the Tata family, Tata Group; the Kwok family, Sun Hung Kai Properties; the Ambani family, Reliance Industries. These families don't merely own companies. They influence markets. They shape regulations. They steer technological direction. They fund political movements. They manage vast networks of subsidiaries, offshore vehicles, private equity funds, and philanthropic arms. The world we live in wasn't built randomly. It was architected, piece by piece, by families who understood the mechanics of wealth before anyone else did. What allows these families to maintain influence across centuries? Three mechanisms stand above the rest. A. Intergenerational financial architecture. Trusts, foundations, and offshore structures protect wealth from taxation, fragmentation, and inflation. Money is preserved, compounded, and transferred with near-perfect efficiency. B. Control through ownership, not visibility. Most dynasties don't appear on Forbes lists. Their power lies in stakes, not salaries; boards, not headlines; institutions, not individual figures. C. Influence without office. They rarely run for political positions. They simply fund those who do. Lobbyists, think tanks, NGOs, universities, and media networks create cultural influence that shapes policy long before laws are passed. These mechanisms make wealth less about money and more about structure, strategy, and continuity. In a world where the richest 1% owns nearly half of global wealth, the patterns established centuries ago continue to shape opportunity. These families didn't just build wealth. They built financial systems, trade networks, regulatory frameworks, philanthropic institutions, global supply chains, cultural narratives. And because the system rewards those who already understand it, dynastic influence deepens rather than diminishes. The average person works for income. Dynasties work for influence. We measure wealth by money. They measure it by power that outlives them. So what should we take from all this? Not conspiracy, not fear, not resentment, but awareness. Because the world's wealth wasn't shaped by accidents. It was shaped by decisions, by strategies, by families who understood the long game. If a few families could build global influence through planning, continuity, and financial literacy, what could billions achieve if they understood the game too? The story of dynastic wealth isn't just a story about the past. It's a blueprint, a warning, and an invitation. Because the real question isn't, how did they build so much? It's, what will we build next? When we left off, we uncovered how a handful of families shaped the architecture of modern wealth. Quietly, consistently, and with strategies that outlived entire nations. But that was only half the story. Because wealth isn't just about the money accumulated. It's about the systems designed to ensure that money never flows backward. To understand how these few families kept their influence intact, while billions struggle to build even a fraction of it, we must enter the hidden world of wealth preservation, global influence, and the soft power that moves the world without being seen. Most people imagine wealth as a skyscraper, tall, impressive, towering over the cityscape. But dynastic wealth is not built like a skyscraper. It's built like a subterranean maze, a system of trusts, shadow companies, interlocking boards, global banking relationships, generational governance, private negotiators, discrete advisory networks. Structures so embedded into the global economy that removing them would collapse half of the world's financial systems. This is the architecture that allows a small number of families to move like ghosts across borders, untouched by political cycles, recessions, or market crashes. And to see how this works, we need to go deeper. There's a strange paradox at the heart of multi-generational wealth. The more powerful a family is, the less visible it becomes. Modern billionaires appear on magazine covers. Old dynasties appear in confidential shareholder lists, quiet real estate registries, trusts managed by anonymous nominees, advisory boards most people never hear of. Consider this. When you search richest families, you find public names. But the largest institutional shareholders, who own pieces of almost every major company on Earth, rarely appear. This invisibility is intentional, because visibility attracts scrutiny, taxation, political attention, public pressure. And the true dynasties don't want any of these. So they control differently, not through ownership under their personal names, but through layers of corporate veils that conceal the actual beneficiaries. In other words, they own everything by appearing to own nothing. In the late 1800s, the wealthiest families began creating something revolutionary. Family offices, private firms dedicated entirely to managing one family's wealth. Today, there are thousands. Rockefeller Capital Management, Walton Enterprises, Koch Industries, House of Saud's Royal Dewan, and Bonney Family Office, Lee Family Office, Samsung. These offices do not simply invest money. They manage global tax strategy, succession plans, political risk assessments, philanthropic branding, technology forecasts, multi-generational estate structures, board placement, and influence. They act like sovereign entities, even though they are not nations. Unlike governments, they have no elections, no term limits, no public accountability. Their only mission is to protect and grow the family's power. And they have centuries of experience doing exactly that. A new wave of families has joined the historical ones. Silicon Valley created fortunes faster than any era in history. Families like Bezos, Musk, Zuckerberg, Ellison, Page and Brin. But here is the crucial detail. These tech billionaires aren't just wealthy individuals. Like the dynasties before them, they are rapidly creating succession plans, charitable foundations, private equity networks, global investment arms, political influence structures. In other words, they're not just rich, they're becoming new dynasties. The modern world changed who the families are, but it did not change the system. The system always adapts to include those who master it. The question arises, how can private families influence global systems without holding office? The answer lies in the soft power tools they've perfected over centuries. Think tanks, organizations that publish policy recommendations, shape economic debate, and influence how nations make decisions. B. Lobby networks, groups that direct billions into elections, legislative pressure, and political sponsorship. C. Philanthropy, not just charity, but reputation management and strategic influence. D. Universities, endowments that guide research agendas and cultivate future leaders aligned with certain economic philosophies. E. Media ownership. Control over narrative is control over perception. These tools operate under the radar. They don't break laws. They don't overthrow governments. They do something more effective. They shape the environment in which decisions are made. The 1990s created a world perfectly engineered for dynastic wealth. Open borders, deregulated finance, tax havens, global supply chains, multinational mergers, digital banking, low-cost labor markets. Globalization wasn't designed by accident. It was built by financial institutions, corporations, trade negotiators, political elites, all backed by the families who understood how the global system should be shaped. The result? Money now moves across borders faster than regulations can catch it. And while middle-class families rely on wages, salaries, and pensions Dynastic families rely on systems that compound their wealth automatically, without their involvement. The global economy operates on two tracks. Track 1, the visible economy, where ordinary people earn wages, pay taxes, save slowly, depend on public systems, struggle with inflation. Track 2, the invisible economy, where dynasties move capital across borders, shift investments instantly, use tax systems strategically, by influence long-term, multiply wealth without labor. The rules were not written equally, but they were written deliberately. And this brings us to the most important revelation. If you study the most influential families across 500 years, a pattern emerges. They share the same 4 principles. 1. Wealth must outlive the person who built it. Money is not for spending, it's for preserving. 2. Power must be transferred, not diluted. Businesses aren't divided, they're consolidated. 3. Influence must be quiet. Public power invites challenge. Private power lasts longer. 4. The system must work for you, not against you. They don't adapt to systems, they shape them. The families didn't simply build wealth. They built structures that ensure their descendants will remain powerful long after they're gone. In a world facing rising inequality, technological upheaval, geopolitical tension, economic fragility, understanding how power is engineered becomes essential. Not to resent it, not to fear it, but to learn from it. Dynasties didn't get where they are because of luck. They got there because they understood capitalism early, understood power before others saw it, built systems with intention, invested in long-term stability, focused on resilience, not consumption. And the truth is, anyone can learn from the blueprint, not to become a dynasty, but to build stability and freedom in their own life. We often ask, how do they gain so much? But the real question, the one that shapes the future, is, what will we do with this understanding? Because the story of wealth is not just a story about a few families shaping the world. It's a story about billions of people learning how systems shape their lives and deciding whether to accept them or redesign them. The rules were written by people, and anything written can be rewritten. The next generation of power won't belong to those who inherit wealth. It will belong to those who understand how the world works, why it works that way, and how to navigate it with intention. Dynasties built the past, but the future? The future is still unwritten.